Welcome to the Franchise Frontier, the podcast where we explore the evolving franchise landscape, dive into latest industry trends, and share actionable tools and tactics to help you build and grow your business.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Franchise Frontier podcast. Today we are on site here in Tempe, Arizona, but the filming must go on. Here we explore the world of business ownership, unlocking the keys to success while uncovering common pitfalls to avoid. Today we're excited to welcome Chris Jenkins, the owner of Stand Strong Fencing of Durham and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We're excited to have Chris on the show and can't wait to dive into some of the insights. So let's get started. Chris, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Chris, as you look at your journey into business ownership, like what kind of inspired you to become a business owner? And is there anything in your background that kind of led you that way?
Absolutely not. There's nothing that inspired me to do it and nothing that in my background would say I should have done it. I was 20 years in oil and gas engineering and liked what I did, had good success with it, but it's a very cyclical industry. And in 2020, the company that I was working for ended up going bankrupt. And I had thought about doing something else for a number of years, ended up working with a friend of mine in a financial services firm. So I'm an owner in a financial services firm here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then just through my client work, I kind of got interested in owning other businesses, just watching what some of my clients were doing. And that's what spurred me to do this. But if you had asked me 6 or 7 years ago, I would have said, I never want to own a business. But that has certainly changed. A pandemic and a job loss can do that to you.
And so as you kind of look back, is there something, and I'm sure that when you went through this process, I'm sure that you talked to multiple people about business acquisition, business ownership. Is there anything in particular that kind of led you to a specific brand or system?
Yeah, definitely. So I did talk to a number of different brands and I talked to colleagues doing different things. And as it happens in my financial services firm, we were running on EOS, on the Entrepreneur Operating System. And so I don't know if you're talked about EOS before with your listeners. EOS is a system that's used to help you plan your business if you're a small company. And I was really sold on that. It was something that was important to me. And when I was talking to different systems and different franchisors and hearing about how they helped their franchisees, I was curious about the systems and processes they had in place to ensure the success of their teams. And what I noticed is that everyone I talked to at Horsepower was super locked in. Like they knew exactly what they were doing, why. They were extremely go-getter, like almost to the point where you're going, are these guys for real? I genuinely wondered that. But the more I probed and the more consistently I found that, yeah, it was for real. And that EOS, Horsepower runs on EOS. All the Horsepower franchises run on EOS. That was something I wanted for my business. And you know what else I noticed? Everyone that I met at Horsepower for the longest time, everyone was either a current or former owner of their own business, which to me was super powerful. It's like, well, they know what we're dealing with. They know what we're going through. It's not just some suit who thinks this is a good idea for me. Somebody's done this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, I was a college football coach for 15 years. And I remember when I first started working at Horsepower in the very beginning, I was learning about EOS. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if coaches knew about EOS and could understand how to strategically position a meeting like that, it would be much more efficient. I remember thinking that it was really a great thing. So
Absolutely.
when you think back to your first year in business, what was the biggest surprise for you getting into business ownership?
Well, let's see. The first year of business ownership in Horsepower, it's really kind of a tale of two halves. The first half, you incorporate, you're trying to lay out your funding plan and you're starting up. And the second half, you've started and you're trying to make things work. And so it's very, very different. So I guess the first half, the big surprise was how much of a pain it was working with a lender and working with the SBA. Never want to do that again. And then the second half, it was just learning about the people that I'd hired and their strengths and weaknesses, and maybe that I needed to do things differently with my hiring. And that's an ongoing journey, but that was probably the big challenge of the second half of that first year.
Yeah, oftentimes I do hear that same thing. We when we plan out the funding strategy and those type of things, when you look at it, oftentimes, people think, oh well, I'll be able to get done with that much quicker than it says or whatever. But really it's it's not up to you. You can do what you can and that process kind of takes a long time. But then you touch on a really good point there too that I think is very valuable for people that are thinking to get into business ownership that not just the hiring and firing is important, but figuring out how those puzzle pieces mix with you as a new business owner as well is one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I guess, you hear people's experience and you think that they're going to have a certain ability to do certain parts of the business. And I guess depending on which franchise you're looking at, you may need more people that have a sales mentality, or you may need people that have an operations mentality. Maybe it depends what you're bringing to the table as an owner and how involved you're going to be. And for me, the general manager that I hired was great at relationship building and those kinds of things, but operations were a challenge for him. And so that was something we had to confront relatively quickly. It was becoming an issue. But you could be of a different background as an owner. You might be great at operations and you may not need that. It's very much about your brand and you as a person.
Yeah, and I would agree with you that oftentimes where you sit as a person in terms of a business owner might be foreign to you, right? To your point, maybe somebody who hasn't owned a business or those type of things, they don't know where they settle in. So that first year, there's definitely a lot of turns and twists and turns in terms of hiring.
Yeah.
So as you settle in, you said you have a general manager hired. Can you describe, and I know this word is going to be foreign because there's no such thing as a typical day for a business owner, but can you just describe a little bit of a typical day for you within your work week?
Well, let's clarify first. So I'm what's considered a semi-involved owner. Okay. So you're going to have really two types of owners at most franchises. Somebody who's involved, they're doing all the work, they're probably in that leadership role, running the show. And then you have someone like me who's semi-involved. I don't even know what that word means because I still put way too much time into this for someone who's semi-involved. I would say. And maybe that's one thing we'd say as a cautionary tale. If you as an owner think you're not going to be particularly involved, even if you plan to hire a general manager, there's enough stuff going wrong in that first year. You're just trying to help them make good decisions, and they're trying to understand how much autonomy they have as a general manager without making you upset. So what is the customer service standard, for example, of our business? When a customer is upset and angry and wants a refund for something, or when there's a service quality issue, those are the kind of things that I get involved in. When we have a pricing mistake, when we're looking at new suppliers, when we have a supplier who's dropping the ball, the service is bad. Anytime I need to stick up for my team, those are things that I do. And then, of course, a lot of strategic discussions with horsepower as new initiatives are coming out, and we're trying to decide how to implement those and what the impact might be on our team. And I do run all the payroll every couple of weeks. I try to stay abreast of all the numbers that we're running. So I probably, I don't know if a typical day is there, but there are some days I probably spend my full work day on Stand Strong, but there's a lot of days that I might not spend any time on it. And it really is part of the blessing that I have as being an owner of my financial services business and the owner of Stand Strong. I have some flexibility, but my phone's always on, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely, and you bring up a good point too because there is the semi-involved owner, and then there is the owner operator, and so you do bring a different perspective. Not every one of our podcast guests that we have on is owner operator or semi-involved, so that's good that you kind of lend a different type of strategy to that. And so, you know, when you talk about sticking up for your team or those type of things, it's you know I think that's kind of why we also talked from going from the word semi-absentee to using that term semi-involved. And to your point, it's probably more involved than you would imagine anyway, because it is your business and you are trying to grow that business.
Well, and you gotta, if there's anyone out here listening that is thinking about being a semi-involved owner, think about what that means for you if things, not if, but when things go off the rails in ways that you don't expect. So I can give you maybe a couple of examples really quickly. So here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I'm at, I initially purchased 3 territories. There was another franchisee who purchased 3 territories in our market, and he was probably 6 months ahead of me. But he was also going to be a semi-involved owner. Hired a general manager. That general manager had a heart attack after 1 month of opening. The gentleman survived, and that part of it was a good story. But I tell you what, that owner was a whole lot more involved than he wanted to be for a long time, and he experienced a lot of turnover. When you have turnover in your business as an owner, it's on you. It's all on you, and that could be a heavy weight. So you may intend to be semi-involved, but if you have turnover and you aren't prepared for it, you're fully involved. And in his case, he was a W-2 employee of another company, and I think it was a bank here in town. And he ended up deciding he wanted to sell out of his location. It's not that the business was bad; it was just it was too much time for what he had. I went through a similar thing. I didn't have a health issue with my staff, but I did have a general manager get poached by a supplier, believe it or not, last year. I wasn't too happy about that, but general manager got poached by a supplier, and for a couple of weeks we were running pretty lean until I got somebody else in there. And as it turns out, all's well that ends well. We got probably a better candidate than we originally did, so thankfully that happened. But at the time, it was pretty stressful. And the other thing I was going to
Yeah.
mention, weird aside, like a week after we opened, I mean, this was, I kid you not, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 2020, I get a call about 9 p.m. From one of my employees that he had wrecked our brand new truck. It was a brand new Toyota Tacoma, wrecked it, didn't know, and he was in the hospital. He didn't know where the truck was. He didn't know, I mean, it was, so over Thanksgiving weekend, I'm on this wild goose chase all over rural North Carolina trying to find this truck. And that's the stuff that's on you as an owner, because you can't ask your GM to go do that on a holiday weekend as a brand new person. Like, no, you just gotta, man up and do it. That's not much fun.
Yeah, I mean, to the fact of the things that come up are the things that cannot be planned for.
Right.
It's a heart attack. It's an accident that happens. And it's not that, hey, we're gonna, the other things that are gonna happen, or, we don't have enough of these bolts. We don't have enough of that. That is kind of something that you can work through, but
Yeah.
the expected, the unexpected are things that are the most difficult to go through. You touch on this a little bit, but from your seat, actually owning another business as well in a different sector, what advice would you give someone who's considering becoming a business owner?
Be honest with yourself about how much time you can give. Be honest with yourself about the skills that you bring to that particular business, whatever business it is that you're considering. If you really do have sales skills, great. If you really don't have sales skills, it doesn't mean you can't be in this business, but you better make sure you have a good salesperson. And how are you going to know that you got a good salesperson? Because salespeople are good at, you know, making people like them, but you need to know that they can actually sell. And that can be a challenge to attract someone to a new business that has no track record and no leads yet. So that's a bit of a challenge. Seems like there's another element of that question, Dave. What am I missing here?
No, I think that's there's the other element that I would ask to you on that is like, so of those, when you talk about doubling down on your own skill set and your own traits, is there a kind of, whether it's sales or operations or those type of things, is there a trait that you think is highly sought after when running a successful business?
I think you have to a degree, not get ruffled by a lot of communication. If you're somebody that is gonna, man, another phone call, another text, another email, and that's gonna drive you crazy, that's gonna be a problem, especially as your business grows. Because when your business grows, there's that many more jobs going on. There's that many things going on. I'll give you an example. So this week, for whatever reason, on Monday, we had a ton of jobs closed. We have a little celebratory group text in our team. Every time somebody sells, a little bell emoji goes across, and then we're sending each other funny clips or whatever just to celebrate. We had so many sales on Monday, it was almost kind of disruptive to the flow of getting anything else done. All the celebrating going on. Weird thing to complain about, right? But if that kind of thing is going to really, bother you, and you still have operations going on, you still have other meetings or other businesses, as the case may be, you got to juggle all that. And if you don't have the bandwidth to do it, then you either need to have systems and processes to help you manage it, or maybe it's not a good fit. That's possible too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. It's, I've heard other people describe that as, being able to be effective within the chaos, right, of those type of things. And it's just to your point, it's a perspective and way you look at it. So if you could look back, and I know it's a little different for you, but if you had to start over, like even you said you had some problem with funding, right? If you could start over and know exactly where you're going, is there anything you would do differently to prepare for owning a business like Stand Strong?
I would not believe one single soul, anything at the bank that they said at all ever. I'm a little jaded there because what will happen, and this is not anybody at Horsepower's fault, but they'll give you a typical timeline for how long things should take. And I think the upper end they gave me for an SBA loan was something like 4 months or something like that. Well, 6 months into this process, we're not done yet. Even and the why behind it doesn't even matter. But I think we went to Discovery Day in May of 2024 and thought, okay, we can open in November without a problem because this is a process. It takes time and we'll have enough time. And that's what everybody thought. That's what Horsepower thought. That's what we thought. And so I was, getting into September and I was starting my hiring process, anticipating everything would get done. And it didn't get done and it didn't get done and it didn't get done. And it was to the point where I had people on payroll that I was paying out of my own pocket because our financing hadn't come through. And it came time, we were literally at Academy to open, and we still didn't have the financing come through. I mean, everything was on hold. And I ultimately told the bank to pound sand because they weren't getting it done. And I had to use alternate financing. I won't get into how I did that. But the lesson, I guess, is don't hire a soul until you've got your whatever your funding mechanism is fully dialed in. I wouldn't even necessarily interview until you've got that dialed in.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I know that it's probably even have a different angle from being in your other business. To your point about horsepower, I know that when those things are built out in terms of timelines, they're just that. They're a timeline, but really, like you said, horsepower really have no control over what's happening. All the paperwork's turned in, everything that's supposed to be done is done. And it's just you're kind of at the mercy of someone who isn't involved in the timeline in general. So I think you bring up a really good point of like making sure that's the definition of crossing the T's and dotting the I's for sure.
Yeah, I should have known better from my work in financial services. But for all y'all that are listening and thinking about working with a bank, just know that they're going to give you a list of documents that they need. And it's going to look like a long list. And you'll say, oh my gosh, that's an enormous amount of stuff. You'll gather it all and give it to them. And then they're going to sit on it for 3 weeks and probably not communicate to you. And then say, oh, here's 10 more things we need. It's like every time it's just further down the rabbit hole. And you say, man, I could have gotten that to you 3 weeks ago. I know you need it. But they'll just kind of keep moving the goal line on you. That's the frustrating part. So, anyway, if any of y'all work for banks, then sorry, I'm probably hurting all your feelings, but it's not a fun place to be in as a consumer.
As you talk about your team and building it out and the funding and those type of things, I wanted to ask you quickly. Oftentimes when I talk to people, that especially when they participate in a subcontractor model at times, one of their biggest concerns is where am I going to find the people? I don't know if that was a concern for you, but if it was, talk about that concern and then talk about as you opened, once the funding got done, how you sort of navigated that in terms of not only your regular team, but your contractors that are doing the installations for you.
I would say finding fencing crews was not a great concern. We'd gotten some good coaching about how to do that. We didn't have a lot of difficulty with it. We were able to get multiple crews right out of the gate. Not that we had enough work to keep multiple crews busy full time, but we had people we could turn to. And it was not difficult to find handymen if we had small jobs that we needed people for. So that was fine. I think what you don't know going into it is what's a fair price for labor in your market. And we were definitely getting overcharged for labor. We were getting overcharged for poor quality labor, is frankly what we got. And none of us being fencing folks by background, it was difficult for us. We didn't have enough technical expertise to say, oh, this is good fence and this is bad fence. Our customers all think they're experts too. We were about that level of expertise when we started. So it took us some time to understand what, real quality fencing was, what a fair price was. And I think over time, I don't think there's a single subcontractor that we started working with that we're still working with. We know which ones are good at what types of materials. We know who to turn to. We have some kind of custom thing or something that needs a real lot of attention to detail, or we have a finicky customer, we know who to call. We just kind of had our bumps and bruises. And that first year, every time you stub your toe, every time you have to give somebody a discount because of something that didn't go right or whatever, you just, like, okay, let's learn that one time and then fix it and never have that problem again.
Yeah, learning those lessons are invaluable. And then, so talk about as you got through there, did you find some of those subcontractors? Did you have some? How were the partnerships with? I know you said that a vendor actually stole a worker for you, so that's not a good relationship. But for the most part, how were the vendor partnerships and those type of things in terms of getting you into the fencing industry?
Well, so I don't know if all the brands have this. I presume they might, but at Stand Strong, there is on our insider page, the intranet for the brand, there is a list of what's called approved suppliers. And it's not that you can't use somebody else, but these are companies that have been kind of pre-screened and vetted that you can utilize. Some of these are national players that are available pretty much anywhere. Some of them are more regional and so may not be applicable to any given market. We've used a mix of both, honestly, and we've had but customer service, especially on a national organization, is probably what matters most. And a piece of ornamental aluminum fence is not all that different from one supplier to another. I mean, yes, there are differences, but the biggest thing is, can I get it on time and at a fair price? And we literally, some vendors, for whatever reason, they don't have great service. They're too busy. They're whatever. They won't call us back. And we have other vendors that are very, very motivated to have our business and want to get it or want to keep it. And, those are the people we choose to work with. We've learned here locally, it's funny, Lowe's, for whatever reason, has the best prices around on lumber, but their delivery stinks. Getting it to a job site consistently just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And then, you talk about Lowe's, Home Depot, but talk about the Z services and Z partnerships if you've had an opportunity to use them.
Okay, so let's talk about Z Partnership as a whole and what it is. So it's basically a team of people at the mothership, of Horsepower Mothership in Omaha, that are working to build national relationships with different companies that might funnel business into the home services market. And there's a number of them. They've got one with a company called Associa, which runs homeowners associations around the country. They've got one with, I think, Paul Davis Restoration and with Surf Pro, another nationwide restoration company. So if a tree falls on your roof or your fence, or you have a flood in your house or whatever it is, they help provide those restoration services. So that might involve a fence. It might not. They have a relationship with a company called Graystar that is a nationwide multifamily living manager. In our market, there's 60 Graystar apartment complexes. And it's not like we automatically get any fencing project that Graystar has, but we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity to build relationships there and get that business. And we've gotten some from it. But you do have to build the relationships. Probably the biggest one that they've been working on the last year is one with Lowe's, where they've arranged, I guess, the opportunity to, if you've ever been to a Lowe's, and who hasn't here, right? You go in there and they say, would you like to install your new furnace yourself? Would you like to install your water heater? Would you like to install a roof? Or would you rather have somebody competent do it? Would you rather hire one of our pros? And basically the way that it's working is we are those pros now. Now, that's not nationwide in every market and every brand, but it's something that's being, rolled out and tested now. And Stand Strong Fencing is one of the first brands that this is being tested with across the country for Lowe's. And our market here in Durham, I think, is the second one to go live with Lowe's. So we've just been on for, I think, 2 to 3 weeks now.
Good. Any way to generate business, whether the it's always nice that even though it's a big box store, when looking at those things and saying, hey, these are our pros, it's always nice to have Stand Strong or one of our other brands represented in there to be able to be the go-to person. It's just another scale of branding as well, to be able to have to be able to do that.
Yeah, and in our market, we're serving a dozen Lowe's stores, and I know this opportunity is going to be available to every franchisee in every market by any means. And I know that it'll vary widely, but they sold something like 300 some odd jobs in our market last year, and that's what they're asking us to do this year, is to be the front face of Lowe's to go sell these jobs. And knowing what we know about fence, we're confident that we can sell probably at a higher average ticket, and create more value as well. More value for Lowe's, more value for the customers, and frankly, more value for us too.
I mean, I'm excited to see how that goes for you guys this year. When you look at kind of how you see the business, especially from your semi-involved role. You know, what do you see for what's next, right? I know that maybe in the next year you're going to work on operations, but do you see yourself scaling more territory? Do you see yourself, just perfecting what you're doing? Kind of what's next for you and your vision?
So maybe I can give some background as to where we are and then give some context to what's next. So right now, our staffing is we have a general manager, we have a project manager who kind of runs operations, and we have two salespeople. The project manager is someone I brought in last July when my original GM was struggling with operations. I needed someone who could run that for us. I figured let the GM sell a little more, let him build those long-term B2B relationships, let the project manager manage and run the operations. And we're lucky he's actually trilingual, and that helps us a ton in our market. So we've got the two salespeople. Last year we had inherited one salesperson. We bought the other franchisee I mentioned near us. So we have 6 territories now. So we have 2 salespeople. As we add Lowe's and think about the scale of what that's like, doubling our business overnight is what we expect to do. And so we've really got to scale up in a smart way. I think we might add a salesperson this year, but that's not determined that we will. We're pretty much full out busy right now, so we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Probably the biggest thing to do, and something we're working on right now, is to get our own permanent facility, a place we can lease, where we can get full truckload shipments of materials rather than what's called a job lot shipment, where you have a supplier dropping, a bunch of vinyl or aluminum panels or wood pickets, whatever it is, to a customer's house. We'll have that whole truckload brought to our location. We'll have our own forklift that will batch out the different loads each day, and our suppliers will depart from our yard. That should save a lot of time for our teams. It should save some time for, well, certainly it'll save a lot of cost as well, and should tighten our vendor relationships as well. They're much more receptive to selling things by the truckload. It's a huge discount too. And so it makes us more competitive for any job that we're losing right now on price, which, is some. I mean, that does happen, but we should be much more competitive if we want to be, or we can use some of that to, one, pay for this facility, but also just have a better margin in general.
That's a different, unique plan. Every time I ask that question, I find that everybody has a different thought process when looking at how they're going to grow. For someone listening right now who's kind of on the edge of thinking about purchasing a business or kind of launching their dream, what's your one message for them?
Be honest with yourself about how much time you have available to give to this thing. It's one thing to think it's a good idea to be a business owner, but if this model, whether it's Stand Strong or a different horsepower brand, if it sounds like it's too much time for you, it probably is. And maybe there's another one you need to take a look at. If it sounds too stressful, it probably is. So just don't overcommit, because once you're in this, if you don't want to be, it's not that it's impossible to get out, but it takes months and months. You might lose a lot of value, even if you have a good business. They're not liquid. It's not like you bought a crappy stock and now you can just dump it and get cash. It takes a while, and you have to find a willing buyer, and that may not be all that easy. So when you're in it, be in, and make it work, and know that if something goes off the rails, you're still in.
That's great perspective. Honestly, that's, being honest with yourself is probably one of the best ones I've heard thus far. This is what, from my coaching background, I always ask a 3 and out question. So 3 quick questions are about you a little bit. What's your go-to unwind after a crazy day?
Unwind. I own 2 businesses, ma'am. I'm embarrassed to say how much I work right now. And so I guess probably the best unwind, and maybe it's a chamomile tea at the end of the day. That might be it.
Okay, that was good. That is dials right into my next question. My next question was going to be coffee, tea, or energy drink.
Actually, I'm none of the above. I got this ground roasted cacao that is unbelievable. So it's ground up and roasted like a coffee, and you brew it up in a French press, and man, the smell, it's great. So you can check it out. I wish I got commission off this, but yeah, Cryo Brew, CRIOBRU. Good stuff out of California.
Interesting. And then lastly, what's one piece of advice that you would give your 25-year-old self?
If I got into financial services because of that exact thing, and what I learned about finance as a 40-year-old that I didn't know as a 25-year-old, I would find a good financial advisor when I was young. And I'm talking about somebody that runs insurance, does business planning, does investments, the whole gamut. You need to make a friend there. They'll help you set up some wonderful decisions that you should be able to save and retire young or better than you might otherwise do if you're well planned out. That's what I wish I'd known.
That's very good insight. So for everybody, thanks for joining us on the Franchise Frontier podcast. I hope today's episode gave you a clearer look into the journey of business ownership. And if business ownership is calling your name, don't ignore it. The playbook's out there. The question is, are you ready to run it? Like and subscribe when you get a chance. And Chris, thank you so much for your time and your insights on today's show.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.